Natalie Mackey, thank you for joining me.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Natalie, you have such an interesting background. I want to go back 9 years, October 2015. Is this your 9 year anniversary for Winky Lux?
It is coming up on our 9-year anniversary, which is bananas. We actually incorporated 10 years ago, but we really launched
Wow,
the company 9 years ago. So
it,
we were
it's
on the fence as
incredible.
to whether or not this was our decade, but I think we're because the official launch was not until 2015, we're going to give this the 9 year.
Yeah, you have such an interesting background. Um, I noticed, like, I'm a big fan of good design. So the first thing that jumped out at me is like your Parsons School of Design. I was like, oh, Parsons,
Yeah.
high quality design, aesthetics, but then finance.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, yeah.
and then
Super
like,
random. I think if I had been a trust fund baby, I would have been an artist, but instead I wasn't, so I had to go work in finance.
yeah. So every time I meet people who used to work in finance and then moved to a different area, they say that I left the dark side.
Yeah,
Uh, I don't
pretty
know if that's how
much.
you feel.
Yeah, it is it's an interesting career path. Certainly a great place to learn to understand like business fundamentals and to learn from really smart people and to also refine a pretty hardcore work ethic.
Hmm.
I like to hire like ex-investment bankers because they always feel like I'm just the chillest boss ever. And they're usually pretty smart, but it is a tough career path it's a tough career path in general. And especially just some people are called to entrepreneurism. And that was me from the very beginning. I really didn't want to work for someone else. And that was just a path, like as the means to an end.
Hmm.
Um, but I always wanted to do my own thing. I think I started my first business when I was like 16. So I always had little side hustles. I always had things going on. I was always
Yeah.
interested in entrepreneurship.
Yeah. One thing, your co-founder too, he was in electronics, I think,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Just I think about the founding stories all the time. Like, what was the original motivation? So I want you to answer that. But another thing I noticed is that, in your website on the About Us section, you're talking about you're the happiest when you're nerding out on supply chain and flower patterns. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that's just so different. Such interesting people. So tell me about it. What motivated you to jump in and start Winky Lux?
Well, I thought there was going to be, I was a beauty junkie. We'll start
Hmm.
there. I was fascinated by the beauty industry all around. Loved it. Thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Loved it from both a product standpoint and also from a business standpoint. I felt that of all these sort of, we'll call them like sexy and glamorous industries, all the places where I really had a lot of passion for the product, beauty was the one that, if you could, it was very competitive, but if you could build something great in beauty, there's so much value created and there's great margin and there's great potential for like brand equity. And I love that. And I like long-term storytelling. And I think that one of the things that makes me most interested in beauty is some of the biggest and most powerful brands are 30, 40, 50 years old. And they have these beautiful long-term story arcs that really tell a story and really like have serviced customers for a great deal of time. Brands like Clinique and Mac. Those are, they've been around for a long time. And I love the idea of not having to reinvent something every single season the way you do in fashion. I love the idea of being able to tell a long-term story. And then on top of that, beauty was just a place of joy for me, always. I could always find a pop of dopamine when shopping for beauty. I could always find like um I just enjoyed the transformational power of it. I enjoyed the confidence of it. It didn't have the same like friction points that fashion does, where you're trying, there's sizing issues, or there are, fit issues, or there's seasonality issues. Like beauty is just such a long-term relationship with the customer. So that was what
Hmm.
made me love it. But we ended up starting the company because originally we thought we were going to start a marketplace. And in 2014, when we were ideating this, marketplaces were very, very popular. And my co-founder, I had left a business that I had helped start before that was in the actually in the fashion space, not in products, but in sales and management consulting. And but I learned a lot about the fashion industry. It was really interesting to me, but nothing was as exciting as beauty. So my dog is literally trying to jump into I'm going to let him up for a second. So you're saying you're looking for a dog? Here you go. Here's one.
Oh, so cute.
He keeps trying to jump in my lap. He's like a very needy dog. If you're going to get a dog and you get a pug, just know that it's going to need you a lot.
Oh boy.
So where was I? I was talking about why we
marketplaces.
started the marketplace. Yeah. So we started a marketplace that had a proprietary quiz that would tell you what beauty products to buy. And during that time, we were doing tons and tons of research on what customers would like. E-commerce and beauty it wasn't new, but it was still in like, I'd say like, the first quarter. And so it was new enough and there was a lot of opportunity. So we began this marketplace. It was an affiliate platform. So we were selling other people's products sorry, he's now digging into the rug. This little dog is making he does not want me to pay attention to anything but him. So we started this whole thing. We knew we wanted to also create our own brand because we saw some holes in the market. And one of the things that we saw was when we were researching our customer, we were doing a lot of just focus groups and they were really casual. We were recruiting from my cousin's sorority and we were having these girls come in and just dump their makeup bags out on a table and tell us why they bought the product. And it was one of the best things we ever did because we learned so much about what the customer wanted and what problems she had. And in beauty, like I'm always comparing it to fashion because those are my two contextual points. But in fashion, there's a lot of friction in the buying process. There's the sizing issue. There's you have to take your clothes off. You put the new clothes on. You have to order, try on. You don't like it, you have to send it back. There's return friction. There's buying friction. It's expensive. It's an entirely different experience. But in beauty, there wasn't that same friction point. The friction was really in the product and what she could afford, but that she was also proud to have in her bag. So we found a lot of the customers would say things. They would dump out their bag, and because the way we were recruiting, we were interviewing a lot of young women, and they would dump out their bag and they would say, "Oh, I just bought this Maybelline mascara because I ran out of my good stuff." But I knew enough about beauty to know that like Maybelline Wet Lash is a really amazing mascara. It's been around for a long time. It's like it's like an OG, really great formulation. There's no shame in buying it. It's a really good product. But it was interesting that the consumer felt kind of cruddy about buying it. And
Because
then,
it's just too mainstream or something? Is that why?
you know what? It looks kind of junky. It's in this like kind of, sorry to anyone listening to this is from Maybelline, but it looks junky. It looks really mass market. It's got like a green and black packaging that just looks kind of chintzy, not luxury at all. Even though the product quality is excellent, the presentation and the packaging is like very mid. And so we knew that she wanted to buy high quality products. She bought a lot of high quality products. She would buy like a Charlotte Tilbury lipstick, and she was very proud of that. She would kind of showcase that and say like, "This is my favorite." And then she would make excuses subconsciously. We weren't guiding her. She would just subconsciously start making, or subliminally, she was telepathing that she was not proud of these certain types of products that she was buying, even though the products were quite good. And so we felt like there was a lot of opportunity in the presentation of a mass market cosmetic, that it should be something really beautiful. It should be something very design driven. Beauty has enough margin that you can actually do that. It was really just the retailer that was preventing the brand from making something really gorgeous, because it's the way that it's sold at shelf that prevents it from being gorgeous. So we kind of set out to create a very highly designed, really, really beautiful brand that had the accessible price point and the clean ingredients that she was asking for. And that was just supposed to be a little way to pepper into the marketplace to help
Mm-hmm.
raise our overall margins and to fix some of the holes that we saw in the market. And what ended up happening is that people didn't really care about the marketplace. Like people were using it and they thought the quiz was really fun, but they didn't really care about we weren't solving a problem for them because again, no one really is sad when they go to Sephora or even when they go to Target to shop for beauty. Like it's almost like a joke or a meme that you're gonna go, you went into Target to spend $10 and you walked out $400 later, or you went into Sephora, like fly money fly, take my money. It's a fun experience. So it's not a pain point in your life to have to go and shop for beauty. It's actually a joy. So
Mm-hmm.
we weren't fixing that with the marketplace. And I think that's one of the reasons that there's a misconception that digital beauty has led a lot of transformation, but actually most of the growth in digital beauty has been from Amazon, where we really saw the transformation was in the actual product and how she could interact with the product. So
Mm-hmm.
we sort of pivoted. All of our advisors said, whatever you do, just don't start a brand because
Oh
it's
no.
really working capital heavy, like very competitive. You're going up against some of the most profitable companies in the world. Like, don't do it. Whatever you do, just don't start a brand. And then we just kind of didn't listen, started a brand. We had the innocence of people who just didn't know what we didn't know. So we
Mm-hmm.
jumped in, and we were really lucky that it worked out.
Mm-hmm. Such an interesting journey. Right around the same time that in 2015 you were working on the marketplace, my first startup, I was building a marketplace as well, right? In 2015, world's first concert subscription service.
Nice.
And at the time I was kind of like dealing with the challenges of running a marketplace where you have to have supply and demand. So in our case, we had to have the promoters and the venues and the artists and the concert goers. Like you have to kind of balance it out, and it was just so hard. And now, you know, in my this current startup, I said I'm not gonna do marketplace. It's just so hard to build the two sides of the. But now I'm kind of coming back around to it again because since I'm in software, it's become so easy with AI to build products now. You have to kind of create new types of leverage points where marketplace brings other interesting. But another thing you mentioned, nobody cared about the marketplace is similar thing in the concert world where people care about the artists, the things on the marketplace, but they wouldn't care about Ticketmaster or StubHub, right? Like there's no emotional connection to the actual marketplace. But so in your case, also like the brands were probably, but then your advisors told you not to do it. So like at some point, so such interesting learnings where, you know, dump your purse and let's take a look at, and then the emotional gaps that you found, and then designer inside you came out, and like kind of were you looking for problems or were you looking for opportunities? Like when these sorority sister potential customer group sessions were happening.
You're really looking for opportunities. The beauty space is generally the sale of happiness and dreams. So you're usually selling an aspiration as opposed to fixing a problem. There are solutions driven products, particularly in skincare, but the most exciting products, particularly in makeup, which is our heritage, is really around the idea of like, this is something new, it's creative, it's a new way to achieve this gorgeous look you want. So it was really kind of a forward looking exploration.
Hmm. So you identify that, all right, the product itself is good. The packaging and the presentation and the branding is just not connecting with these customers. That's why they're feeling kind of like embarrassed to even say that they had to use this because they ran out of the other thing. So that to you, okay, so this is what we're going to do. So now what's the next step here? Like you're going to make your own first thing in your
Yeah.
house, in your kitchen. Like you have to make something now. What
Cool.
were the first one, two, three things to make? And how did you do
I
it?
laughed so hard when I found an old binder the other day that was like my first product development binder. And it had just like all of these. And some of the stuff was like really good. Some of the things that we that had inspiration, and it had contract manufacturers that we had collected or we had gone to visit. One thing that we've made so many mistakes along the way building this company. Like anyone who says they haven't is just full of it. Like there's been so many mistakes, but there from time to time you do like something really right. And one thing I think we did really right in the beginning is we knew enough to be dangerous in manufacturing. I had through the brand licensing work that I'd done before that, I knew enough about manufacturing to be dangerous. Like I knew a little bit about. I kind of knew that a lot of products were made at the same through the same companies. I knew a little bit about like the ecosystem of the contract manufacturing world and the lab world. And so again, like enough to be dangerous. And we
Did you have contacts in those spaces? Did you know who to email?
I had a few, and then I started just Googling and writing them down. And I literally have like this binder just full of contract manufacturers, because in the very beginning we were learning. And so, and again, this is a thing that I highly, highly, highly recommend anyone who's starting a products company do is to go and visit as many manufacturers as you possibly can. A good manufacturer will always let you come to the site. They'll always let you do a tour of the factory.
And where are those manufacturers?
Oh, they're all over. I mean, there are thousands of contract manufacturers in beauty, and in most industries, right? In food, in
You have to get on a plane, or can you find one in where you live?
You can mostly find, look, the Northeast corridor has a ton of them. California has a ton. Florida has a ton. So certainly around the Atlanta area, there's a ton. But certainly if you're in the Northeast, there's like an entire corridor. It kind of runs similarly to like the drug manufacturing corridor in New Jersey, some in Long Island. There, you can call, you can say like, I have a product that I'm looking for a contract manufacturer. I'd love to come see your lab. You can go, you can meet the team. You can usually do a factory tour. And we went to almost 50 factories. We went to California. We visited probably 7 or 8 factories.
50?
We visited.
Why not 3 and 4 and say that, oh, that's enough. I learned enough. 47 more?
Yeah, we just kept going and going and going. Well, there was a couple of things that we needed to do. Number one, we were super, we were using our personal savings to bootstrap the company. So, we're buying in, or we're bootstrapping the company. We're building out this tech platform, and at the same time, we're also, about to buy our first round of inventory. So we really had to stretch our capital as far as we could. And what that meant was we needed to find factories that sat at an like a really important intersection. They had to be innovative enough and large enough that they had real scalability, right? We didn't want to start with a factory that, that did nothing, but they had to be small enough that they would take our business. And we
like
were doing
small MOQs.
We were doing runs of 1,000 units or 2,000 units. So they had to be small enough to do that, they had to believe in the product. And then on top of that, they had to be really willing to either give us terms on the second order or even the first order. So we convinced a few factories that were good factories. Like there are schlocky factories too. There are ones that are just kind of terrible and disorganized, and there are some that are premier that produce, for the biggest, most prestigious products in the country. And then there's all this stuff in between, and we needed to find this sort of intersection of
the Goldilocks factory.
Yeah, that believed in the product, believed in the business, was willing to give us terms. At the very least, we were willing to pay upfront for our first order, but we knew we could never shoulder the working capital if we were going to hold, if we were going to have our working capital out for a year, right?
So interesting. It's like going to VCs, like trying to raise money and getting turned down by 100 of them, but you just won't need one to believe in you.
Yeah, totally. You need a factory to believe in you.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, our first factory that really believed in us, our first supplier is still our largest supplier. And so they built, tens and tens of millions of dollars of business by taking a risk on a newer brand. But again, we had to find, what was so interesting about that factory is that they specialized in injection molding. This was really a packaging factory, and we're really known for packaging. So they were going into the cosmetics packaging business. They were a really large business that did different types of injection molding, and they were learning the beauty business. And they said, like, okay, we'll do some custom molds for you for free. We'll work with you to learn the business kind of together. And to this day, that's like our most important supplier and the supplier that has done some of our most innovative and like iconic packaging has been that particular supplier. So I think the supplier sourcing process is often and people they think it's just about product quality, and it is about product quality. And you do need to go and vet your factories. And you do need to be able to like take video, especially if and we went to China as well. And we have been, we physically audit all of our factories for lots of reasons, not just for, human, for, ethical reasons, but for, and quality reasons, but also, so that we understand like what their actual operational process is. So I think that's one thing that gets left out a lot. Someone has a great idea and they find one factory that can do it. But the reality is there's usually a lot of factories, and you could also lose a relationship with a factory. You could have someone we worked with one of the most prestigious factories in the beginning on a stick product that went pretty viral. And that factory was consistently 6 months late. And so they could have tanked the business. Had we not had a good understanding of what else is out there, we wouldn't have been able to shift the business into someone else very quickly. So I think that's a place. And not only that, you can never walk into a factory without learning something. You just can't. You walk in, it's magic. Like they're making the magic right there. So you learn about processes, you learn about new innovation, you learn about product. And so much in the beauty industry is done kind of in a boardroom with like marketing decks. And I think it's a huge loss. Like if your product developers are really good, they should be in the factory consistently understanding what's going on and seeing like the new innovative product and, having like a tighter grip on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my little piece of advice to people.
So Natalie, did you go from idea to factory, or is there a kitchen component to this where you're making your own? What was the first product? What did you choose as the first product?
The first product was a lipstick, and it was inside like a pill-shaped bullet. So our first real innovation, we had really beautiful custom formula for the lipstick, but we didn't, I would say it wasn't like groundbreaking. It was just a very nice formula. The real innovation was in the packaging. We were the first to do this like very cool packaging design. And then we had a powder that had, it was like a complexion powder, like a setting powder that had crushed diamonds in it. It was called the diamond powder. And those were the products that we launched the brand with. So it was a very strange merchandising strategy. Now I look back and I'm like, why would you launch with those two products? But they were the two that we felt the most passionate about, and we found the most interesting formulations and the most interesting like technology that we wanted to incorporate. And we thought there was a hole in the market.
And how did you sell your first 100 lipsticks?
I would say our first was really via Instagram. So we started posting on Instagram. We started kind of building a community. We reached out to every friend we've ever had in our lives, and started to get them on an email list. Built that up for a while, and then when we launched with this like really sexy looking lipstick product.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to say, I read that you take about 45 days to go from idea to launch, which caught my attention because when I talk to beauty or skincare founders, I hear numbers like 1 year, 18 months, 2 years. How is 45 days? Like, is there some kind of a magic process you nailed down here?
No, there's two processes. We have two supply chains. So we have our short run supply chain, which is where we'll test a product on e-commerce. And then we have our commercialized supply chain where and really that's being led by the retailer. Because when we started, we were direct to consumer, and we could be so flexible and nimble. And now we're trying not to ever lose that part of us because it's part of our DNA. So it's like one of the best things we do. So we never want to completely get rid of that. But what we do is we'll test a product via D2C, and that we can get out the door in 45 days. And really the way that we do that is we stock our own packaging. So
Mm-hmm.
we do our own packaging design. When it comes in, we generally will hold back on a certain percentage. We call it the box of magic because it used to literally be boxes in the office. We would ship them to the supplier, but they're now it's obviously held in a warehouse. And if we find something really interesting, we will candidate it for a short run
Mm-hmm.
concept. If it works, then it gets commercialized. And some of the products are some of our best sellers we found that way. But then when products that we're launching with Ulta or Target, those are on a 1 to 2 year cycle. So we've sort of we sort of live in both of those worlds. The one being we have to innovate in concert with our retailers' reset schedule, and the other part is, like how do we figure out what's going to be new and hot in the
Mm-hmm.
moment? I mean, blush was a great example of that. We did some web exclusive blushes and really saw like the blush bonanza begin to happen as it was going, and then we ended up doing a really custom liquid blush that is now one of our best selling products.
Natalie, you mentioned in the early days you were bootstrapping, but then what was the fundraising experience like you as you were growing the brand in the first few years, and now it seems to be quite controversial for DTC brands to fundraise. It's just a lot of people discuss this all the time. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's always hard to fundraise. I think anyone who says it's, I don't know anyone. I have so many founder friends, and every single one of them had a difficult time fundraising. So I don't know. There's like this fantasy or this like strange narrative that goes around. It's like a fairy tale of the founder who woke up one day with like an amazing idea, wrote it on a napkin, and had tons and tons of people ready to invest in them. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if you're like a bro and you went to Horton and you have a bunch of bro friends that are VCs, maybe that's the way it works. But I just haven't even seen that be something that's real. Most of the people I know, even though the narrative is usually like it wasn't that hard, we had a lot of terms. Most of them meet with a ton of VCs. There's lots of negotiation, and I just haven't seen it be that easy ever, especially in consumer. Consumer is not really a place where VC played for the majority of the existence of venture capital. They just really didn't. It's really a vehicle for tech investment. And only in the past like 15 years has that asset class like even been interested in consumer. So you've seen more VCs do it. And then there was obviously like a huge pop. And then and when everyone pretended that consumer was like exactly the same as tech, which obviously it's not. And then we saw it drop down again. So I would say in consumer, it's one of the more fickle industries to raise capital. We've been successful at it. It makes us more of an anomaly than a rule. There's so many great companies that have such a hard time raising. Um, so I think anyone who's going to raise should just buckle up. Like, I don't know if there's a VC I haven't talked to in my life. Like, there's so many that we have met with, so many that we have pitched. Um, I think it is like, again, there's always exceptions to the rule. And once in a while, you do meet a founder that had it really easy. But I think for the most part, you're pitching quite frequently. And you're expecting a lot of no's. And you're refining that skill, right? Like that's a skill set that arguably, if you're going to grow something really fast, you're going to need a lot of capital to do it. So either you're going to go out and you're going to use, if your product margins are insane and you have like a really efficient model, potentially you can just use debt to cover working capital, which is just your inventory capital. That's a simple oversimplification, but for better or for worse, it's the money you use to continue to fund the inventory. Um, you could potentially do that, or if you want to grow really fast, you want to invest in brand, you're usually going to have to raise institutional capital, and doing that is hard, and it's like a whole new skill set. So it is not necessarily overlap with like operational excellence.
Hmm.
So, which is what we see sometimes, right? We'll see like, tons and tons of capital flow into something, and it turns out like the business model was nonsense. So, yeah, I know that didn't, I was like a long-winded way to answer a
Yeah.
short question.
Speaking of growth, what kind of growth levers worked for you? At what point did you figure out something that started clicking and you said, "Oh yeah, like this is gonna work.
Yeah.
Let's just like do more of this." And when did that
Yeah.
happen? And what was it? And over the past few years, what's been working, and what do you think is gonna stop working now as the client, marketing landscape changes? Um,
Yeah.
like what's gonna plateau?
Um, so to answer your first question, it's changed a lot over the years. Meta was huge for a while, then influencer, paid social really worked for a while, and then influencer really worked for a while. And now we're in the land of TikTok affiliates and some traditional media, which is really interesting, like direct mail and commercials are working really well. So I think the business of selling products is the business of figuring out the most efficient way to be in front of your customer all the time. Um, and that's just so dynamic. It's never going to be the same forever. And if it is, if you do hit it, and we do from time to time, we'll hit something really exciting, but usually it just means that you're there early and eventually others will discover that and you'll be in the world of less efficiency. Um, I think that influencer, like paid influencer, will be the face of that is going to change a little bit. Influencers have kind of they morphed into sort of like celebrities for a while, where you're paying for endorsements, and the ROAS there is just not. It hasn't been as good, and the shift in the way the content is consumed into mostly short form video and mostly raw video as opposed to like highly stylized means that like really great viral content really doesn't necessarily come from someone with a ton of followers. Like TikTok has been amazing at democratizing the ability for something to go viral all on its own, like in a vacuum, right? You could have someone with 10 followers that could have a video. I mean, this is an extreme example that will have a video that goes viral and gets 10 million views. So I think that's a big change. And that is going to continue because the consumer wants really good content. Sometimes they're more emotionally connected to the person creating the content, but oftentimes they're not. Um, the way I think of it is kind of like I have really great Netflix shows that I watch, but if something better is on Apple TV, I'll just watch it on Apple TV. So there's no loyalty to platform. I think it really, and now that more and more people, including boomers, and older millennials are now on TikTok, I think you're seeing that consumption pattern be so much heavier. People are spending 90 minutes a day on TikTok versus I think it's like about half that, and that you probably correct me, but it's significantly less on Meta, so on Instagram and Facebook. So I think it's just changed. I don't. I think great content will be more. It'll come from a lot of other places. I think. Um, what are some other things that are kind of over? Oof. I'll probably get killed for saying some of this stuff.
Say it.
Um, again, again, I think the paying of influencers is going to kind of be over. I think it's going to move into more of a commission-based and affiliate-based model for the
Mm.
foreseeable future. Um, I think we're going to go through like big, like influencer creation is get the cycle is getting a little tighter too. So you'll see someone be super hot for 4 or 5 months and then sort of, I hate to say forgotten about, but it seems like the consumer kind of moves on much quicker unless that creator is excellent at creating like episodic content that people really look forward to and they become emotionally invested in the person.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's the most fun thing about this industry and like in all consumer products. It's like, how
Hmm.
do you get in front of the customer? How do you like fight for her eyeball, his or her eyeballs?
Speaking of creators, For the creators who are listening or watching, how do you evaluate potential collaboration opportunities with creators? What do you look for?
Um, we generally look for people who have a, this is going to sound trite, but it's true. We look for people who really love the brand. So our brand has a very diverse age demographic. Our customers are really like 13 to 80. Millennials make up the largest chunk of it, but we have a huge, thick halo in Gen Z and Gen X and even into boomers. And we have as many Gen Xers as we do Gen Zers. So we really have this really wide demographic, bigger than most of the brands that I've ever seen. The diversity of ages is really surprising, especially since our branding feels very young. But we think of it as more of a psychographic. So the Winky Lux customer is really someone who loves maximalism and ornate high design. So in general, the customer wants, a lot of times we see that customer as someone who is kind of unapologetically feminine from the time they were 10. So, you see like little girls wearing giant bows and sparkling boots and things like that. Those are the customers that grow up to be our customers, or those are the people that grow up to be our customers. They buy a lot of other products that they buy are like Love Shack Fancy and Stony Clover Lane and all of these like very indulgently girly brands. And we have Winky boys too, but they just also tend to have that same aesthetic, like very, very, very girly. So we look for creators that are already designing in that space, who are already playing in that space. And we actually don't need creators to be beauty centric. We love a beauty centric creator, but we find conversion that's almost as good on with creators who do things like interior design that's very maximalist or travel that's very, very maximalist. So we kind of are across a lot of different themes, but they all have the same psychographic of high indulgence, very like a love of design, a love of beautiful things, very little minimalism. We're sort of like the anti-minimalism brand. And if a creator has like wallpaper all over their house, we're like, that's probably the creator for us.
Natalie, 9 years, 10 years into your journey of building Winky Lux, knowing what you know now, if you wanted to start a new brand, what category would you choose?
Oh gosh, there's so much cool stuff going on. So much cool stuff. I think there's a ton of interesting stuff happening in food. I think there's like a big change in the way people see food, so I think that could be interesting. Um, I think there's a lot of disruption in fragrance, in there's fashion I might avoid just because I think that the disruption that's happening there is more in supply chain and people are just able to access like less and less expensive fashion. And hopefully there's going to be a movement towards like more slow fashion. But I don't know if that'll be a sea change with the consumer. I think that's more niche. Um, what would I choose? Oh my gosh. I think maybe something in like wellness. I think wellness has just become much more a part of our daily rituals.
Like
Uh,
supplements or something?
yeah, yeah. It's just been so, and I think the way that people consume wellness content has changed, and there are like wellness influencers that are different from previous generations of wellness influencers, where it was like a muscle guy, like creatine in a gym. There's so much more around, mental health and supplementation and hormone health and supplementation and gut health. And that influencer community is much broader and much more like the more accessible. So I think maybe that would be it. I don't know. I don't have any plans for another company yet, so but I'll tell you what I do.
Natalie, final two-part question. Two problems giving you a headache right now, and two priorities for the year that you're excited about.
Okay. So We are in like we have the smartest team. They're so good. And it's like, this is one of the best things about being an entrepreneur is you get to handpick the people you work with every day. And I think our team is like one of the best out there. But I really want to integrate more AI tools into the team.
Hmm.
Um, because I think we can be more efficient. I want to hire slower and hire more senior people as opposed to hiring more support, because I think there are enough AI tools that can really help like make everyone more efficient. So I want faster integration of all of those tools into the company. So that's like, I wouldn't say it's a headache, but it's like a challenge right now. And then I think, there's a lot of trepidation around the election, and consumers are being very cautious with how they spend, and rightfully so. Like, this is the time when brands better get it together, right? Like, they really have to have a very specific, good value proposition in order to make sense. But it'll be nice when that's over and we can kind of move on to like focusing on more joy and more fun, because I think that's going to be something people really want post election. They're going to just want to take a breath and relax for a little bit, because this is like this year has been just full of anxiety for people.
Gosh, I can't wait. I'm putting on election stress weight. Uh, so I'm looking forward to kind of moving forward as well.
Yeah, I can't wait for this holiday season. Like, we need the holidays to come. We need it to be really big, really fun. Yeah.
Natalie Mackey, thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.